Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by leprechauns. They're tiny, they're greedy, and they're hard to catch. Now, let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Super Pork, the soda that's built to last. Drink it now or pass it down to your great-grandkids for them to enjoy. Drink Super Pork. Welcome everybody to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we make films. We shoot and direct and write and act and edit and score music and points, I guess. We do all kinds of scoring and all of that. And we use all of that kind of behind the scenes and experience to look at films and see how do they work. We're called the pestle, like a mortar and pestle. You grind up wheat or whatever and you make flour. And so we grind up a movie and see what it's made of and use it to bake a show, so to speak. And so with that, we got a lot going on today. And so I think we can just dive right in, sir.
Let's do it. So today we are covering Ghostbusters, the original. So if you haven't seen this film, please go pause this episode, go watch it. There's going to be lots of spoilers going on. So
yes, we're going to talk about a bunch of things: story and writing, the efficient storytelling, the comedy style of the film. We'll look at some of the sound and music, the soundtrack itself. And then, of course, we'll also listen to a new Mad Valley track, Todd's band. Only Good Things, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, buddy. So we have all that going on and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. 3 parapsychologists forced out of their university set up shop as a ghost removal service in New York City, attracting frightened yet skeptical customers. It's directed by Ivan Reitman. It's written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis. Cinematography by Fujimoto. And featuring Bill Murray as Dr. Peter Venkman, Dan Aykroyd as Dr. Ray Stantz, Harold Ramis as Dr. Egon Spengler, Sigourney Weaver as Dana, Rick Moranis as Lewis, Annie Potts as Janine, William Atherton as Walter Peck, and Ernie Hudson as Winston.
Funny us going out like this, killed by a 100-foot marshmallow man. We've been going about this all wrong. This Mr. Stay Puft is okay. He's a sailor. He's in New York. We get this guy laid, we won't have any trouble.
I have a radical idea. The door swings both ways. We could reverse the particle flow through the gate.
How?
We'll cross the streams.
Excuse me, Egon. You said crossing the streams was bad.
Cross the streams.
You're going to endanger us. You're going to endanger our client, the nice lady who paid us in advance before she became a dog.
Not necessarily. There's definitely a very slim chance we'll survive.
I love this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it. Let's do it.
This job is definitely not worth $11,500 a year.
That's a great place to stop it.
I love this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it. I say that sparingly whenever I'm not excited to be a part of anything.
anytime our VO fearless leader slacks you.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love this plan.
It's definitely not worth $11,500 a year.
Dude, so this is coming on 30 years old, or 40 years old.
I was going to say 40, yeah.
Decades. Tell me it holds up. Why do you think?
So, okay. So I watched this last night with my kids, PG.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'll just watch this with the kids. And surprisingly, my son loved it. Like,
Yes.
I've watched other movies with him that I thought he would like and he didn't like, or maybe it was just bad timing and he was bored or something. I don't know. But he, he's wanted to watch the new one. And I said, no. Well, first off, it's PG-13 and you can't, we're not going to, we try to stay away from PG-13. But also, you can't watch the new one without watching the original. And so he's a big fan of of watching things in order. So he didn't want to watch, he wanted to watch all the Back to Futures in order. He wanted to watch all the Spider-Mans in order. He wanted to watch all the Marvel from like in sequential order, like he's very, Star Wars. He's very much like that. So this was our first venture into it. So I thought, this 40 years old, I don't know if he's going to like it, whatever. And there were a few comments, of him saying, man, that looks so bad. That looks so fake, whatever. But he also laughed a lot, like multiple times out loud, which I mean is, he laughs at things. I get it, but not really out loud. He just enjoys things like an adult, like you'll enjoy something, but you won't necessarily laugh out loud. I'll watch Always Sunny and I'll enjoy it every moment of it, but I won't necessarily laugh out loud all the time. That's kind of how he is. But in this film, he laughed a lot. And then this morning we were actually filming, and we were walking back, and I said, "Hey, what'd you think of Ghostbusters last night?" He goes, "I loved it." I said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I thought it was hilarious." I said, "What's your favorite part?" He said, "The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man," which was my favorite part, and honestly, probably the most memorable part of that movie is that, right? Imagine being a kid and then you're seeing this giant.
Oh, it's iconic. Yeah.
Yeah. It's iconic. Exactly. That's the great way to put it. Yeah. So he loved it. I mean, I enjoyed it too. I enjoyed reminiscing. I like Bill Murray is brilliant. Dan Aykroyd is brilliant, and they play their role. And Rick Moranis is so always fun to watch and everything. I just don't like the movie. I just don't. Yeah, I don't. I just have to say it. And
okay.
For me, it doesn't hold up. I feel like, well, first off, I was very uncomfortable with a couple of the sexual innuendo stuff that happened, watching, with my kids. And so that I was like, man, that's PG. There's no way that would be PG now. Like, I mean, maybe it would be, but I would be mad if that came out as a PG movie and that stuff was in it, And then, there were there was a comment at the beginning. At the beginning, Bill Murray's character asks the old lady if she's on her period.
Right.
And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? Like,
Back
that
off,
wasn't
man.
fun.
I'm a scientist.
Yeah. And then asked that. I'm like, or asked that. And then he says that. And I thought okay, whatever. That's obviously a sign of the times, like that would never be in any movie now, nor should it. I mean, I don't know. It was just, there were a few things like that where I was just taken out of it. Just like, why? That wasn't funny and, whatever. But I like the story premise. I thought it was a lot of fun in most cases. And enjoyed the reminiscing of old times. I don't really have a whole lot to talk about with it. To be honest, I feel like I loved watching because Simon knew the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man was in it. So he even knew that before watching the movie because it's that iconic. Yeah. So he kept asking, "When's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man coming? When's it?" And I said, "Just wait."
The traveler has come.
Yes. But there were a few really funny moments and everything, and a few frustrating moments too that are important, that are great for the story. The guy shutting off the holding tank for the ghosts was so frustrating. It was like, dude, why do you have to do that? But of course, they need the ignorant, city guy to come in and shut them down, and that creates chaos and everything. So so that they can then save the city. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was fun, but I don't, the performances were fun for a kid back then. I thought Bill Murray was probably the best out of all of them. I don't know. Dan Aykroyd played a great Ray. So, but I remember personally, I think it's the second one. Which is the one with Vigo?
With the ooze, yeah.
Is that the second one or is that the third one?
Yeah, that's the second one. They never ended up making the actual third one.
That's right. They never made the third one. I remember that one more than the first one, to be honest.
Holy crap. Okay.
So I'm curious if the second one holds up more than this. To me, this one doesn't hold up. if I don't see it again, I'll be fine. I don't think that I learned anything from it either from a filmmaking standpoint, at least not that I have learned so far, but I'm curious as to what you could teach me in your review. I don't want, I'm not trying to tear it down or anything.
No, that's fine. I think that's totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah. It just didn't really land for me in any real substantial way. From a lighting perspective or a cinematography or, even storyline. I mean, I just felt like they did what they could with what they had at the time. And, if somebody were to make this movie now, it'd probably be, it could be like, it could be really good, make it for kids now. It could be really good. But anyway, that was my thinking there.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I had the 180 experience.
Great. Oh, awesome. This is awesome. Yeah. This doesn't happen very often.
Not very often, no.
Yeah.
Like I was dying laughing almost the entire time, like by myself, just watching it in my room, and was laughing out loud, sometimes in complete stitches, almost entirely around Bill Murray. Like his dry humor and his, kind of disaffected personality was just killing me the whole time. And I watched this a lot as a kid, so I kind of already have this whole movie memorized. And so every line that gets said is, I could almost say it, beat for beat. And there's a few things that I didn't quite remember correctly. When somebody asks if you're a god, you say yes. For some reason, I thought two people said that. You say yes, but that was just
I mean, that might be, and we're in Winston. A simulation, and that's changed,
right? Maybe so.
Anyway,
and so I was dying the entire movie, picking up things. I didn't think it had been that long since I'd watched this, and maybe the last time I watched it, I just wasn't fully paying attention or something. Like maybe I was at someone's house and they had it on in the background. And so I was only kind of paying attention, but sitting and watching it this time, it was like kind of rediscovering all these jokes that I didn't really catch as a kid. So like, being Simon's age, there's a lot of jokes that just don't make sense. I didn't understand, like even in the park, there's a couple of things that happen in the park where he's meeting Dana after she's leaving, rehearsal. And she's walking out with that guy. He calls the guy a stiff. I didn't know what that meant. And I remember kind of asking my brother, and I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, he's a dead guy. And I was like, wait, what? And so it just didn't click, the kind of commentary he was making about this guy being like just a boring, dull musician by calling him a stiff. And then, of course, at the end, as he's walking away, he's like, I'm glad you're feeling much better. Still a little pale, though. And so he's just kind of still laying on this joke about, being a stiff. And all of that was lost on me. I thought it was still like amusing because Bill Murray's amusing. He can say anything, and it's just his tone is just going to carry the humor. But then as they're all walking away, there's this guy in the background who's on skates and he's spinning around, and then Bill Murray is spinning around, and they kind of had the same orange shirt. And I was like, what is happening here? Do people do this in parks? Like I was so confused as a kid trying to digest all this information. And it made no sense. But I checked with my mom and my brother I couldn't remember if this was the first movie I saw in a theater. I would have been 3. And so I checked because I remember them talking about how I got really scared in the theater with the dogs. And I don't remember any of that. I kind of remember sitting next to my brother, and that's it. I remember like being in the seat and seeing my brother next to me, and I probably couldn't see over the seat in front of me, because we didn't do a lot of theater seating, I guess, before the late 90s. And so I asked him, and my mom didn't remember nothing. She was like, I don't know. And so I asked my brother, and he was like, yeah, we actually saw it back to back. We saw it twice, like in theater.
Like you watched it and then you stayed there and watched it again?
Yes.
Oh my God.
I don't know whose call that was, but they were right. I don't care what Todd says. And so, but my first movie, apparently, for those keeping record, I had to dig up my baby book, which is bare. There's nothing in my baby book except my first movie. My mom actually recorded that, and I was barely 2 months old, and she had me into movies already, watching, of all people, Robin Williams in Popeye.
Oh my God, that's incredible. That's wow.
2 months old. Amazing. First off, Mom, what are you doing? You just terrorized an entire theater of people.
She is not letting that kid get in the way of her entertainment.
That's right. But yeah. And so I don't know. I grew up with this thing, man. And there's so many moments from this movie that I've been saying as a part of my daily life. Bite your head off, man. Like that must be some cockroach. Like all of it is just part of my personality. It's embedded.
I loved that, by the way, because he's smoking.
Yeah.
He's smoking a cigar, and they get into the elevator, and there's a big no smoking sign right behind them. It's such a great little, like, there's no reason for the no smoking sign to be there or for him to actually be smoking. Right. But why not?
Why not?
That's great.
Little layers, little touches. You slime me. We used to play Ghostbusters, growing up, and have proton packs, all that. And it's funny because I was really excited when the second one came out. And I remember going to see that and was just very underwhelmed. And so it's funny. The one that you actually really like is the one that I was like, they missed it.
Well, I say I liked it. I don't remember.
Although a lot of people love it because it has its own charms now. And I think carrying the first movie into the second movie was too much. Now, maybe if I go back and rewatch it, maybe I enjoy it a lot more just because there's no pressure to like it anymore.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. But no, I loved it. There's so many little details. I scrubbed through the special features. I bought the Blu-ray, and they have some special features, and there's a few things that I kind of picked out. It's not the best special features because it's them kind of sitting around talking about it and a few cutaways, but you don't really get a good in-depth look on how they're accomplishing certain things because they are doing some pretty amazing effects, especially, for its time. And I just imagine using some of these effects in modern movies, what you could do is so much better. Like the ghosts, especially. I'm really impressed with the ghosts because it's doing two things. It's combining puppetry with kind of a green screen rotoscoping effect. And so the ghost librarian at the beginning, right? She's sitting there floating. Well, sitting there and floating are two different things, but she's floating there and she's paging through the book, and she's holding that book. And that book is not transparent. It's a real book, right? Whereas she's entirely transparent. And so the way they do that, of course, is, from what I gather, is they shot it against a black screen instead of a green screen, and then rotoscoped her and made her transparent, but then also separately rotoscoped the book itself so that it would not be transparent. So they're going frame by frame.
Oh, so they rotoscoped both of them, but just made her transparent. So she is literally physically holding the book.
Yeah, that is actually her holding that book.
Okay. Wow. That's
really impressive because it's all, and I don't think they would do that now. Now I feel like they would, or at least maybe after that, because I've seen other films do that similar effect, except they're having these two separate shots. And now you're leafing through the book, and the person that's holding the book doesn't really look like they're holding the book. There's just this discombobulation where I was watching the book and I wasn't trying to do it. I was just like, whoa, those pages are like in the most subtlest way reacting to her. Like there's a little fold in the page based on where she was placing her finger that was pressing the page. And I was just like, man, that's crazy. And so I was like surprised when I saw that, okay, that's how you do that. And my God, that's attention to detail for sure. But then some of the other shots, like the ghost coming out of the subway, similar. Now you're having another puppet that you're staging and going frame by frame. They said that the process on some of those shots took like weeks for 1 second of motion. And it was just this painstaking process.
And they're working with film. guys.
And they're working with film.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's probably where a lot of the process is killing you, because you're having to do an exposure for a different exposure and layer it in with the camera move. And I mean, there's just, 10 different things happening, because then on top of all of that, once you get to the end, you're having to create a new exposure that layers all those things down onto one actual strip of film. And so it's just this painstaking, painful process. I mean, it's impressive, but it also goes to show just the level of discipline, let alone all the other like matte paintings that they have of New York for backgrounds, and sometimes for like other explosions when the building explodes. The top comes off the firehouse. Like that's a matte painting, and you're staging this miniature, I'm guessing, on top of. It's just crazy. The layers that go into making something 40 years ago, whereas now it's like half completed CG stuff that they're just shipping out the door because they got a release date on the schedule. It's like, well, this could use another 5 passes, but good enough. Whereas these guys are like, we're going to not leave this room for a month, and then we're going to have 1 second of footage. It's like, my God.
Dear God.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of things I really love about it. I think the story and the writing of it is impressive. So I'll run through some of that, because I think it's incredibly efficient storytelling. And we'll kind of compare that to what people do now. For one thing, this is comedy, and I think that carries different expectations and allows a lot more leeway into how you tell your story. And so that's one big factor, as we're kind of parsing some of this. But for instance, we meet Venkman at the beginning. We have that initial hint of a ghost scare in the library, and immediately cut to Venkman, and he's running a not so honest experiment, right? He's hitting on his subject while shocking the other guy. And it's just, what I love about it is there's no backstory to him whatsoever. We understand who he is, who his character is, through his choices and his dialogue. Like, it's all through action. And I love that. In a similar way, we meet Lewis and Dana in the hallway there, and we immediately understand their dynamic just through the staging of the scene, as well as the way their characters are dressed even, and through their tone with each other. The performances are carrying 90% of that, but the writing is there too. And it's helping you understand just these two characters, who they are to each other, because that's important as the film develops. And so he's a cloying nerd, and she's this kind but evasive, hot neighbor, quote unquote, right? Where that's how she's treated throughout the movie. And so you can see this dynamic of the nice, pretty girl and the nerdy, clueless neighbor, and how they are just ill combined. But because they're neighbors, they are thrown together, and as in an odd couple kind of way. And it's great. And that you don't need to tell us any of that. You don't need to tell us. We don't need to see Lewis at his accountant firm, ringing up customers. Like, we don't need any of that. And in a similar way, we get 2 detailed ghost sequences, and that's really it, right? We get the librarian, where they meet her and fail. And then we get Slimer, where they meet him and win. And then otherwise, we cut to a montage of after Slimer. Immediately, instead of seeing them go on another run, we cut to a montage of just post-ghost wins, right? Smoking traps coming out, and they're covered in stuff, and magazine covers and interviews. It's a really easy, free sequence with no chunky visual effects. We don't see a single ghost, I don't think, in that whole little sequence.
And Simon actually didn't like that.
Really?
Well, I agree with you. I think it's great, efficient storytelling. And we talked about it a little bit, actually, because he said, why aren't we seeing them like beat the ghosts? Like, he wanted to see more ghosts or whatever, but that's fine. I think that's good. That's a good thing.
Because what they're able to do then is save all the real ghosts for the montage after the containment shutdown explodes. And so now it's just short snippets of ghosts instead of these long drawn out sequences. And it does a number of things for you. One, way cheaper, right? If you want to do a whole new Slimer sequence, that's going to eat up a lot of budget. But it's also more visually interesting, because you're just able to cut to one ghost to another ghost to another ghost. And it's just like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. And so it's, I think, a lot more exciting to see them all kind of juxtaposed against each other. And it also, because of all that, builds the scale of the world in our minds. I think it far better than another protracted ghost hunting sequence. And it allows for you to get through to the story, the things that actually matter, while giving you a taste of the supernatural, other things that are out there. And budget, again, is probably the primary motivator for something like that, but also just general runtime. This is 145, and I think it's a very, very tight 145. There's not a lot of waste that's happening in here as far as story sequences. And most of the scenes, I feel like, are just these little 1-2 minute sequences that you get in and out of, and allows you to breathe for 3 to 5 minutes in all these other sequences. So if you can get in and out, get a hit of Ray Stantz shouting jargon at you, and then cut to, you know, the emotional stuff, the relationship stuff, that's really going to drive the heartbeat of the story, right? Peter trying to get with Dana, Janine trying to get with Egon, and how oblivious is he to every time she's trying to make a pass.
Yeah.
Like, he's very serious, and all he thinks about is moles, spores, and fungus. And so,
oh, when he said that, Simon laughed. He goes, he started laughing, and he goes, he could have said anything. He could have said anything, but he says mold, spores, and fungus, and he's laughing. He got it. That was great.
That's awesome. And so, yeah, overall, the whole structure of the film allows for us to just keep jumping forward in time without hammering needless story beats. Right, we go from Venkman running a sham experiment to the librarian Ghostfell, to being kicked off campus, choosing to start their business, getting a loan in a building, and then we cut to Dana, who sees their ad, and just seeing that ad fills in a lot of in between from them getting a car to us seeing them in an ad. You fill in all that gap. Everything that it takes from getting started to being ready to go and run your business. Like, that ad says they are open. We are ready to go at a moment's notice now. And you just fill all that in by cutting to someone else, Dana, who's about to experience something that's going to impact the rest of the film. Like, super, super tight, right? And then these are chunky notes too. Yeah. And so throughout the entire film, we're never really doing a lot of backstory, virtually none, right? There's no hiring of Janine, or figuring out their name, what should we call ourselves, or building the proton packs, right? We just cut to the important bits.
That was a surprise for me.
Right?
I thought, I was like, did they not like figure out like a containment thing? No, they just had it.
They just had it. Cool. It's Egon coming out of the librarian and saying, with these new readings, I can now do X, Y, and Z. And he just does it. Like, and it gets you a number of things, but it's just so much tighter and cleaner, and able to just stay with the heartbeat of the story, where you can now put the comedy in. You don't need other films. I feel like would absolutely waste so much time with all this other stuff. Like, who is Venkman really? Let's see him failing in college, or doing some other stuff. And it's just all needless. And instead of doing any of that, you know, building the proton pack and having these weird zany, like, well, that didn't work, and people smoking, you know, right, their hair on fire, and just like, oh, one more time, guys, or whatever stupid stuff. Other films, we've seen that bit a billion times, and it's just not fresh or interesting. And instead of doing that, now when we go to turn on the proton pack, it's a little hair raising, and it creates some comedic tension, which could have been lost with all the extended sequences of futzing with the proton packs. And I love that moment, and I'll come back to that here in a minute. But by and large, the comedy here is super downplayed, right? There's not a ton of on-the-nose jokes. It's all situational and character-based. It's letting the straight guy play in contrast to the game show host, is what Dana calls Venkman. And it works. Everyone takes the ghost situation fairly seriously, right? Ray and Egon, super serious. overly so, which gives them their quirky silliness and sets up a really great contrast, to Venkman. Because Venkman, I think, is an amazing character that brings the world to life because he is skeptical. Even though, he has a degree, a quote unquote degree in parapsychology. I don't think you can get that in America. You go other places with less rigorous standards of academic, accomplishment, let's say. Let's dance around the fact that you can't study ghosts. And I don't feel like I need to spell it out why you can't study ghosts. If you need that completed, then
another podcast.
Yeah, it's a different podcast.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I agree. Bill Murray makes this movie for 100. Me. Like he's the reason why I enjoy this movie. If I do, it's locking into how does he deliver a line, like when Dana is possessed and she's in bed and he's basically like getting her off of him, and he says this funny line. I don't even, maybe you remember it. But he says this funny line or something, like she has this voice and he says, "Oh, you'd be a good VO artist," or like you'd be a good voiceover artist or something. He says some line, or I don't know, but some line, and it's hilarious. And it's in the middle. It's just a throwaway line, but it's in the middle of something that's kind of serious. It's a possession,
Yeah.
But I'm sitting there laughing because of him. He just can turn any line into something that is at least lighthearted, if not funny as hell.
Absolutely.
And it could be a throwaway line.
Yeah, he carries it. And I think for this film, a lot of it is coming through this idea that this guy doesn't take any of this seriously. Like, he's experiencing these things, and yet he's completely unaffected, and he almost doesn't believe it. Like, there's one part of him that's like, what are we doing? Like the whole library ghost sequence, Venkman is looking for ways to discount the phenomenon. Like, he's questioning the librarian's mental history and capacity, right? He's throwing out, "Are you menstruating?" And even the guy next to him was like, "Wait, what does that matter?" And he's using his role as a scientist as a deflection. Like, "Hey, I'm a scientist, man, back off." And so it's just his way of trying to figure out, why is this bullshit, not how can this be true? Because Ray and Egon are doing enough of that for everyone. Like, they're already believing before they've seen anything. Whereas he's playing the complete opposite 180, contrast of, I'm not believing any of this, even when I do see it. And so he writes off the stacked books very sarcastically. He's like, "Yeah, no human would ever stack books like this." And he's just kind of looking at these guys like, "What are y'all guys? They're books. Like, what are we doing?" And so his whole persona is deeply sarcastic and unaffected. And I think it even plays into some of the physical stuff, because after that huge explosion at the end, where it's like, no one could have survived that.
I'm so glad you said that. I was watching it thinking, what the hell?
Yeah.
But yes, you're right.
And that's also the layer of comedy. They're downplaying everything that happens. And everyone is covered in marshmallow, like head to toe, just foaming out, everywhere, except Venkman, right? Yeah. He walks out and he's got a little on his hair. And everyone's like, "You okay? You okay? Yeah, you okay? Peter, you okay?" And he's like, "Fine." And you look at him and it's just such a great downplayed, underdelivered line. Like, "Dude, I'm fine." Like, look at me. Yeah. And to that end, the downplaying of everything, they do that throughout the whole film. Like, I love that when the keymaster and the gatekeeper come together and kiss, what happens is that Dana dips Lewis down for the kiss, right? But they don't play it up. It's not like a zany moment. It's still very dramatic, right? The music is pounding and it's this big moment. And so they're downplaying the comedic effect of this woman, dipping a guy for a kiss. Like, no one's trying to be funny in this movie. It's all just there, and you're either going to grab onto it or you're not. Same thing as with the opening, with Venkman shocking the college student and lying to him while being super kind to the cute girl. It's just hilarious. It's him and the audience reading the situation and picking up the context of it and enjoying that for what it is, instead of most comedy, that gets made is so much bigger, and it's almost winking at the audience. Like, you get it? You get this joke? And they never do that. It's just, you're there, you're not. They're going to move on. They're playing this world to the nines. In a similar way, I love the cut whenever they're out front of the building at the end and they're about to go in, and they're like being celebrated by the crowd. And they're like almost dying, and they crawl out and they're like, yeah, we're fine. We're going to kick its ass. And it's just this huge amount of energy. And then we cut to them in the building gasping with their proton packs, and there's like the tedium of the stairs. And they even use the music that's just very boring, like doom, doom, da, da, da. And it's just, oh, we got to climb all these stairs. This is not what heroes do. Heroes are at the top already. And they're just, out of breath. I love that contrast, that immediate like excitement to tedium. It's a great cut. And again, it's funny if you let it be. And if not, not everyone needs to laugh at every joke. And I think that's the gift also of not leaning too hard into the comedy, is that if a joke doesn't work, it doesn't pull you out. You just kind of keep staying with the story.
That's a good, I never thought about that. That makes a lot of sense. Wow. I think you just put comedy in perspective for me, actually.
Me too, actually. I didn't really, but that's why a lot of comedies don't work for us, right? Is because they're waiting for you to laugh, creating this space for it, using this, the snare and hi-hat. And you're just like, okay, I get it. Can we stop farting and move on?
Yeah, instead of just allowing it to be what it is, either it's funny or it's not. Let's go on to the next thing. Downplayed comedy is definitely. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think comedy is very hard to do well, and I think that has a lot to do with it, is because, there are these pauses for reactions, and I'm not in a nightclub watching a stand-up comedian. With 100 other people laughing around me. I'm sitting, with a couple of people or alone watching. So yeah, treat me like I didn't get it, and just go on to the next thing, which this movie does really well. So just
keeping it moving. And to that end, like the sound and the music, I think do some really nice things. For one, whenever they first turn on the proton packs, I died because the sound is so violent and like loud. And it just caught me by surprise because everyone reacts to it too. Obviously that's a post effect. But for them, they turn it on and they just immediately like, whoa, and they start edging around the elevator. And I think it's one of those things where leaving headroom in the sound mix really helps pay off that moment, so that, you can cut to something much louder. And it brings up the layer of tension of like, whoa, this thing is way more powerful than these guys should be handling. Like Venkman in no universe should be in charge of a neutron collider. That's a terrible idea. And in fact, later in that sequence, right, there's that moment where Spengler is like, Peter, shorten your throw. I don't want to get my face burned off. And we cut to Venkman, and he's looking at his pack, and he's like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Don't cross the streams. Yeah.
Important safety note. And so thanks, Egon. And so the same thing, like leaving all that, headroom in the top end of the mix also allows you to play up the big action sequences, the explosions. I imagine getting this remixed in like 5.1, which I'm sure there was no such thing in 1983, allows probably a really fun theatric experience. If they've gone back and been able to do that. But sound wise, also music wise, I thought the theme song, great for the montage. It's super corny, right? But it acts as an ad. And so it's very cheesy, but it explains who they are and what they do. And you pair that with the visuals of them doing it. And so it becomes this very corny, very fun and memorable thing. And so no one gets left behind, right? That's the kind of song you would expect in someone's radio jingle. Like, oh yeah, this is, what we do. By contrast though, my favorite music in the movie is after the explosion of the containment unit, and we play that song Magic. And it's just this weird, trippy, funky track while all the ghosts are escaping and we're watching them kind of pop up around town. I understand the dilemma there. Like, you need to find a track that works and creates a layer of tension. But you also don't want it to be scary necessarily. You want it to be psychedelic and, ethereal. And so finding the right tone for that, I can imagine they demoed, 100 tracks looking for the right thing and stumbling on this weird little thing, which I was curious because I was like, why have I never actually heard this song? Wherever this music is coming from, I've never heard it. And so I pulled it up on YouTube, and it's the weirdest thing in the world because the first 90% of that song is like a generic radio pop love song. It'd be like, I don't know, stitching on the B-52's Love Shack, almost not quite that far, but a very generic pop love song. And then stitching that onto the end of it. And it's just this total tonal shift at the end of the track. And you're like, what? This guy must have been high as hell making this song, because there's no reason this should have popped out of what I was listening to before. And I think either there's another mix of that song that I haven't heard yet, or they did a complete different remix for the movie, which happens a lot, of course. And because they're doing things in the track for the movie that really aren't happening in the song itself. That's a really inspired whoever made that call. I don't know in '83 if you necessarily had sound supervisors or whatever, but they crushed it, because that's a really cool moment to me. Now, to your point, this entire movie still feels dated. I'm not going to sit here and say that you could release this in theaters today like you can some old school films. You can't. Like there's a number of things that make sure it's dated. Not the least of which is the audio itself, right? It's a lot thinner. Like once you get to the 90s, audio takes a leap forward, as we've talked about in some recent episodes. But here it's a little thinner. It just doesn't have the full resonance and the bassiness that you get out of later technology, whether that's the capturing or the mic itself. I don't know. But that at a minimum, let alone all the wardrobe and just the general vibe of early 80s.
Yeah.
But cinematography, yeah. And that's the thing with the cinematography, though, is it's comedy. So there's probably not that much different other than just the lighting itself, because a lot of comedies still kind of use this deep depth of field. And that's most of this film. There's only a few shallow shots that, like, oh, if you pulled that frame out, that's a good looking shot. And literally there's maybe like 2 of those shots. One of them off the top of my head is when they're looking up at the building after that right before the big quake happens. There's this little weird shot, this handheld walk shot where we start on, I think it's Stantz, and we move over to look at Venkman or Egon or someone. But it's really shallow and it's a funky shot, but it works because of the sequence. But it's super shallow, and it's like, man, that's a really nice looking shot actually. But not a lot. Like that's few and far between. But that's comedy. Like I think it also helps. The set design isn't super nice. Like a lot of the props, like the rooftop, it's not super high end in terms of this feels, I don't know, super dramatic. And I think that's playing into the comedy. Now it still probably looked really good for '83. It just hasn't aged particularly well. But there are some things that I think have aged really well. I thought 80% of the dogs were really nice. Whenever they're just kind of sitting there and making their faces, that looks hella good. Their stop motion animation stuff, super dated, of course. That's how that goes. There's not a lot of stop motion stuff that isn't going to date well. Like that's just par for the course. But it's still, I don't know, it still kind of transports you, especially if you're familiar with it. But because it's comedy, I think it still plays just enough for new audiences. Like I'm both surprised and not surprised that Simon had a mostly good time. Same thing with some of the other stuff. The proton itself, the particles, like super corny. A lot of that's, hand drawn animation kind of stuff. Super cheesy. It doesn't always line up perfectly well with what's happening on screen. And honestly, that's stuff I picked out as a kid. Like, just because I grew up in the 80s doesn't mean I couldn't tell good effects from bad effects.
One line he laughed at that I was like surprised that he laughed at was the Ray, when someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes, which is what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
He actually laughed. I said nothing, and he laughed. He said it again. He has this thing where he watches movies, and if he likes a line, he'll repeat it immediately. And so movies that he really likes a lot, he's just constantly talking over there, repeating lines that are said. Just like every, 1 minute or 30 seconds, he's saying lines. I have to say, dude, come on, man. Anyway, but yeah, he repeated that line. Ray, when someone asks you if you're a god. So I thought you'd like that.
Yeah, there's so many little moments. The only other little cinematography thing that I thought was, funny and logical was the Ecto-1. The first time they take the car out of the firehouse, which is a whole funny aspect to this. They're kind of playing firemen, right? They have their fire hoses with the the proton packs, and they're living in a firehouse, and their vehicle is this ambulance hearse looking thing. Really fun. And the first time they take the car out, they do this speed ramp as they're leaving the station to give it some of this like chaotic frenzy juice. Like, it's really going, isn't it? It's so corny. But I don't know. It's endearing. Again, because it's a comedy, I give it a lot more leeway as opposed to if you show me a 1983 drama, I'm probably going to give it hell for the pacing and, bad visual effects, all of that. I'm like, nope, can't get away with that. Like you need.
And it's also endearing for you, like it's a movie, it's one of your earliest films, and you remember loving it. And so there's probably, I'm not saying that there's like a bias there, but I'm saying there's some level of endearment that you bestow upon, that everyone should bestow. I mean, one of my favorite movies was The Sunshine Boys growing up, and I showed Simon that, and he was bored to tears. Like, there was nothing about it that he thought was hilarious, but I can tell you every single line, so anyway.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, to some degree, I definitely went in hoping to like it still. And the fact that I was really just genuinely laughing. I don't really laugh at movies, especially if I'm by myself. Like I just don't. I kind of spot the humor and I enjoy the humor, but I'm not going to laugh. Like, I could go watch a lot of Judd Apatow films and still find the humor in it, but I'm not going to laugh. And for me to be sitting by myself, like rolling, like there's all these little moments. There's this when they finally get to the top of the building, or the 22nd floor, to Dana's apartment, and Ray is looking around and he sees the stairs, and he asks, like, where do those stairs go? And Peter looks and he says, up. And it's like, and then suddenly Peter's like taking charge. He starts going up, walking towards the stairs, like, yeah, let's do this. And then like this thunder hits and all this lightning crackling in the sky, and he pauses and he's like, yep, go ahead. Go ahead. And he starts.
Simon laughed at that too. Like, all these moments you're calling out. Like, yo, that's right. It lands.
It's so good. Like, it's just simple. Yeah. Again, downplayed humor. But I do. Yes, I went in with some bias and went in hoping to, but we've reviewed other films. I think 12 months ago, we did one that I was really excited about and ended up hating, right? Talking about a well-known, Predator movie. I won't say which. But like, I'm not afraid to also like completely turn on a film. And that's happened with other films that I remember loving as a kid, and I go back and watch it and I'm like, this is terrible. Why did I like this? I should have never done this, because it could have been good in my head forever. Yeah, I think, again, the comedy aspect really helps smooth out a lot of the things that, would otherwise rub me wrong. Yeah, and they just, man, they went the extra mile. Like hearing some of the things they did. Now, some things it was a little sketchy. Like there's the scene where after the big explosion and the Marshmallow Man gets destroyed, you have the shot of Walter Peck getting just slammed with marshmallow, foam. And apparently when they shot that, he didn't know what that was going to happen. They told him, hey, you're going to come stand here. And then and that'll be the scene. And so he goes and running around doing his thing, right? And then he lands on his mark, and he looks up and sees what's about to happen. He covers his head, and they just hit him with all that foam.
That ain't cool.
Not cool. He was not happy. Apparently, this is what the visual effects guys were saying. Like he was not very happy. Ivan Reitman apparently didn't let him know exactly what was going to happen, and so his screaming, yelling might have been very genuine reaction.
Wow. Okay. I believe it.
I don't know. Apparently he was fine, but it's just one of those like, hey, give me a heads up if you're going to dump, 50 pounds of goo on me. But they also were struggling with the foam suit, the Marshmallow Man walking around, which they were like, these suits cost like 25 grand each, and they had 3 of them. And the guy kept freaking out, the actor in the suit, because you have to light him on fire at the end. And they're taking a lot of precautions around that. They're not just like, yep, here you go, good luck. It's not that, which probably was happening in other films and that kind of thing. But they light him on fire, and I think he's just freaking out. And so he lands, he just falls face down, and which is the signal to like, put me out. Something's wrong. Something's happening. And so they put him out. And what they need him to do is hit the building, like walk up, slam into the building, and give him that look. And he just keeps like not doing it. And so they go through 2 suits of this guy getting lit on fire and falling down. They're like, okay, we got one more. Let's get another guy in here. And they're like, look, we just need you to do this one thing. Get lit on fire and then hit the building. Is it so hard? And the guy's like, all right, yeah, no problem. And the thing is, the suit is made of this styrofoam or whatever it is, some kind of toxic thing that once you light it on fire, you can't breathe it in. And so they're like, you have to wear supplied oxygen because it's too toxic for you. And the guy apparently didn't want to wear it or something. And they're like, no, you're going to wear this. Like, we know that, it's a loose cannon kind of idea, but no, let's be safe. And so he did, of course. And they got the shot and everything was fine. But it was just one of those things where you only have so much time and so much resources to make this work. And I think the beauty of a lot of these guys working in the visual effects department, which were guys that worked on like Star Wars, and other films like that. And one of they're constantly thinking about, the script says X, what do we actually need to make this scene work? And so one of those things, they were talking to the director, Ivan Reitman, and they were like, okay, look, the script is saying the Marshmallow Man rises out of the East River. You don't want to do that. That's going to cost you so much more money, and we can save you, hundreds of thousands if instead we just introduce them through the buildings. Like we just catch glimpses of them before you cut to a big shot. It's more efficient. It makes more logical sense within the context of the scene, and it's way cheaper. Do that. And so that was part of their job. And that's the beauty of working with professionals who understand their role, and also understand what you're asking them to do and how it affects the story and how they can do all of that with less money. Mm-hmm. And that's an amazing resource that you have when you hire the right people to work on a project. And that's the thing with working on films with passionate people, because they care about what they're doing. They're not just punching the clock. If you get the wrong people who come in and are just trying to punch the clock, and it's like, okay, well, you want it in the river, I'll just do it in the river. They're not actually trying to work with you and talk through what's important for the story. They're just there to push, X's and O's and run the play. And it's like, no, let's work together to make something better. Let's figure out the intention and how we can execute it with less money, less resources, but also help the story in the energy that they're telling. Because that cut is really cool.
It really is. I mean, kudos to Ivan Reitman then for listening to them if that really did happen, and they made that suggestion, and for him to not say no, we want it to, we want that visual, to say, what would it be like to just reveal him like he just exists, kind of like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. Where does the T-Rex come from? Screen left, whatever. He just is there. Okay, yeah, between the buildings. Okay, cool. I could see that. Yeah, great. And that's going to save us how much? Awesome. Fantastic. We get another suit. We have 3 suits now for the burning scene instead of like 1 suit that's going to be ruined because it's going to be coming from water. Like, yeah, okay, great. Love it. Kudos to the director for then, not just saying, no, I have a vision, for entertaining the idea, even if it had nothing to do with money, for just like the story's sake of like, do we really need to reveal where it came from? No, it came from Ray's mind is where it came from. That's it. So
love it.
Great point.
Really cool. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, that's as far as my notes go. I think it's still a really fun movie. Bill Murray is a king. Dan Aykroyd, my God, like just genius. There's all these little moments that happen that finally make sense to me as an adult. Again, like aim for the flat top. I didn't know what that meant as a kid, that it's a hair reference. And apparently casting Gozer, they originally were thinking about Paul Rubin to play Gozer. And then moved on from him to Grace Jones they were thinking about. And then for whatever reason didn't end up using her and used, this other, I'm guessing she's a model.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. And they styled her clearly after Grace Jones though, because I think the flat top came from what writing around, this is going to be Grace Jones. And so she, still influenced the movie in a significant way. And so, yeah, things like that. I didn't really ever understand the pun. Whenever Ray spots the marshmallow man climbing up the building and he says, roast him. I was like, it's a marshmallow, right? You roast him. Anyway, like there's all these little puns that are happening. They're throwing around. It's fun. It's silly. Anyway, I could watch this in a movie theater again today and have a really good time.
Wow. We are so opposite on this. This is great. I absolutely did not have any of that feeling watching the film. But to each his own. And I think that this is definitely something that, I'm glad it exists. I'm glad my son had some good enjoyment from it, and it was good to revisit. But I think I'm good.
Nice, very cool.
Awesome.
So, what are you going to recommend this week?
So this week I'm going to recommend a film that like I really ended up liking, but I don't know if anybody else likes it. But I think I told you about it. It's out now. I think on Apple. No One Will Save You. I think I told you about it. It's a alien visitation movie.
Oh, on Hulu?
Oh, maybe it's on Hulu. Yeah, it's on Hulu. Yeah, sorry. It's on Hulu. But I didn't want to watch it because I was completely judging it from the font they used. And I hated the font on and so I thought this is, just trash. And I want to recommend it because it's just interesting. There's no dialogue in the whole movie. There's just no dialogue. So it's interesting shooting a film with no dialogue. And, you have to rely completely on the actors. And they actually, I think on films like that, you expect to not see the creatures because you think, okay, they probably don't have a budget. So they don't have a budget for the creatures or whatever, but you see you have experience with the creatures. It's like a full on story. And, it's not the most amazing, alien story, but there is subtext, and I can tell that it's actually a story about an individual and working through something. There's a parallel meaning behind it,
Nice.
which you kind of understand, but you really get it towards the end. So,
Dude, cool. I will check that out.
it's fun. And it's quick. It's an hour and a half.
Oh yeah, that's in and out.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'm going to recommend, this is hard because I had two and I couldn't quite figure out, like I was leaning towards Three Amigos just because you get some of these same classic actors doing a comedy. They're much more big comedy. Instead, I'm going to go with another childhood favorite, probably super cheesy as well. It's called Explorers. It's the first movie I saw Ethan Hawke in as a kid. And this was it's a kids movie. So it's about kids creating a device that you kind of have your Egon Spengler in the group who's creating things. And they create a device that allows them to travel into outer space. And, you know, see what signal they pick up a signal and it's like, what is this signal? Where is it trying to take us? So they go to wherever this signal is being sourced. And so I think it's a really fun kids movie if you carry those expectations in. I haven't seen it in a really long time, but I imagine it's still pretty fun. So it's called Explorers. It's probably streaming out there somewhere. There's like maybe a 20% chance, but it's fun. It's kids movie, science fiction, takes itself, fairly seriously at points, but also knows where to have fun and to not take itself so seriously. And so it's a really good clash of science fiction and subtle stylized humor with kids. And so fun stuff. Explorers. Yeah, stay tuned for next week. We continue looking at ghost stories with a surprise low budget big hit called Paranormal Activity. I told Todd I was surprised that he would want to cover this one. I felt like this, I don't know, like to me, this is probably funny to you, but like, I was like that it feels beneath Todd. Like
what?
It feels beneath you.
It's voyeuristic. It's exactly on track with me. It's like, I don't.
Stay tuned for that next week. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to cover, we're happy to take a look. And so if you want to comment on this episode, let us know what you think. Does it hold up? Do you still like it as a 2023 audience member, or do you only like it as a 1980s viewer? Those are two different experiences. And so you can leave that note at thepestlepodcast.com/Ghostbusters.
Are you Team Wes or Team Todd?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And our quote of the day, I'm glad you picked one from Bill Murray, and this one is great. Our quote of the day is from Bill Murray. Don't think about your errors or failures. Otherwise, you'll never do a thing. It's so spot on. So my kids, they make, little videos and films and stuff. But my son is so type A, if something isn't right, then like if so-and-so can't participate or whatever, then he just doesn't do it. And I keep trying to tell him, you can't look at stuff like that. You just have to go do it. Go make it. Don't worry about, if your last one wasn't very good, or if so-and-so didn't do a good performance, whatever, just go make something. It's don't worry about things that are imperfect. If you worry about that kind of stuff, then you're never going to make anything because it's never going to be perfect.
It's never going to be perfect. You're always going to assume the worst is going to happen instead of respecting the creative process. I mean, we talk a lot about the Ira Glass quote about the gap, right? Like you have this vision in your head of what you want to create. And then once you create your thing, it looks nothing like the vision in your head. And so there's this gap between your vision and what you're doing. But if you stay in there, that thing that got you into it in the first place, your vision, your taste, your ability to see something greater than what you're doing, you'll eventually get better at closing that gap down until, you're pretty much making the thing that you're trying to make. And at the end of the day, man, the Ghostbusters didn't let their failure stop them. They lost their jobs. Their pets' heads were falling off. They lost all their money. Their first time seeing a ghost, they wet the bed. Like, that didn't stop them, Todd. They went and still decided, we're gonna go bust some ghosts, and they did it, Todd. They ghost busted everyone.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
Nice. I'm excited because now we're going to take a listen to a new track from Mad Valley. Anything you want to say before we hit play on this, man?
Yeah, I guess so. Just quickly, it's one of my favorite songs on the record. I have a couple, but this one is really special. I think it was one of the first tracks that I started working on when I thought that I had something kind of interesting and special. And this one in particular is, it's about my kids and the way things I want to leave, the only thing I want to leave for them. And then, it's meaningful for me. So yeah, one of my favorite songs on the record.
Nice. Let's take a listen.
All right.
I can see why that's one of your favorites, man. My God. I love that opening, that huge synth opening, and it just slowly builds. Add that little, I don't know, heartbeat kick drum. It's a really great build. And then you add more layers once that verse hits. A lot of body to it. It feels like it just gets bigger, which it already felt big. And so finding ways to do that is probably tricky. The lyrics, so simple, so sparse, it really creates a lot of emotion and a lot of depth, maybe ironically. And yet, you're doing a lot. This feels like a very patient thing. And the breakdown, I love that breakdown because it becomes from this big thing to this other. It doesn't get small though. A lot of breakdowns feel like, they try to go smaller, but this isn't doing that. It's a different kind of big with the, I don't want to call it a choir, but it's like the ahs and the echo of this kind of guitar, punching you a little bit. It's overall, this feels like a very patient song in a way that, I don't know, your writing, I don't feel like always goes to the most patient place in terms of the classic "Don't Bore Us, Get to the Chorus." And yet, I mean, this song is still doing that. It's not that, it's not getting to its point very quickly. It is right off the bat. But yet it's still, because of that sparseness and the repetition, it feels, it doesn't feel like 4 minutes. It feels like both 60 seconds and 10 minutes. Like it's a weird kind of otherworldly place, I think. Yeah. Tell me about this, man. What do you hear whenever you're making this?
Well, I'm glad that you feel that way. For this one, I wanted to like sonically feel like I was, like this is 10 years ago for me, because I cannot make anything with anyone else in mind. I just can't. I can't do it. I've tried and I can't do it. And so for this one in particular, I had these chords, which, by the way, that's all the song is 4 chords looped the entire time. It doesn't change. The dynamics is what changes. We bring in and out instruments to create those dynamics. You replace drums with that guitar line, bing, 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 which is why the down chorus, you don't lose the beat really, because that guitar keeps going. But so where the instruments come in and what comes in, what comes out is what dictates the parts, like the sections. And when I had those 4 chords, I thought, oh man, I instantly feel like I'm living on the East Side, in 2013. We just bought our first house and we're like, getting into it, getting into the life, like, and I felt like I was instantly back there. But I was also 15 years ago, and I was also 7 years ago, and it just felt right, those chords. And then from there, I thought, okay, well, what happened in 2013? Oh, okay, I had my son. And then 2015, oh, I had my daughter. Okay, cool. And then that line, "What I Want for You is only good things." That was the first thing that I said when you sit down and you have some chords and you try to think of a melody. And I didn't even have a melody. I just said that. And I thought, that's it. That's the whole song, is that line. So I'm going to open the song with that line because, like you said, this is going to be a patient song. I don't even think I want to change anything, have a chorus, quote unquote. So if I don't have a chorus, I need what is this about? Let's say it right at the very beginning. That's the first line. And then everything else after that is just a support of that first opening line. Right. And I repeat it, like 30 freaking times in the whole song, I guess. But, yeah, I wanted it to be patient. And then at the end, we had this big drum section and this big guitar section, and I loved it. I thought it was groovy and a cool section and everything, but it just didn't make it on the record. Like at some point, I had to make a decision: is this really working, or do I just love it because I have demoitis? And it turned out that was that I'm really glad that I was talked out of keeping it on the record. Scott talked me out of it. Scott and Jet both talked me out of it. I'm really glad that I listened to them in that scenario, because I just feel like it changed the vibe, because it, like you said, like it is a vibe the whole time. And so then to go into this other direction in the last 30 seconds just didn't feel right. So anyway, yeah, it's a special song for me. Every time I hear it and listening to it, sitting here with you, even more so do I feel like that. Like, I feel like we're back in that house starting this podcast. You know what I mean? Like while, you know, my son's sleeping upstairs and, you know, my wife's watching TV downstairs, and we're just at the desk and, you know, talking about Wonder Woman or whatever it is, you know? And it's a really, you know, it's just a really special moment in my life. And to be able to capture that feeling in a song for me, like that's, you know, that's all the value. That's all the value. Yeah. So, hopefully people like it. But I think that anybody can relate to that when you think about people that you care about, whether that's kids or, you know, a girl or mom and dad or, you know, whatever. So thanks for playing it, man.
Dude, love it so much. Well done.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. All right. Well, now that that's over with, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. I really loved talking to you about Ghostbusters, and I love that we have differing opinions on this because that doesn't happen very often. But let us know in the comments what you think about Ghostbusters and what you'd like to see us review. We'd love to pull apart any film that people recommend to us. So if you make a recommendation, maybe we'll do it. Who knows? And also, please share us with your friends, subscribe, review us anywhere you get your podcasts. It all helps a ton, and we appreciate all of it. We really do. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies. Don't cross the streams.
Touch our tips.
Oh yeah.
That's totally what they were doing.
Yes. 100%.